In order for a change to be made, there needs to be someone with the courage and will to make a difference by fighting for what is right. Throughout her life, Eleanor Roosevelt proved to all not to underestimate the power of one person, no matter what race or gender. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights was motivated by the experiences of previous world wars. It was established through the General Assembly of the United Nations and was the first time that countries agreed on nearly all elements of inalienable human rights. This declaration begins by acknowledging that the dignity of all humans is through the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace worldwide. Through this document, it is declared to be universal to everyone with no exception. To signify these justices, the Human Rights Declaration includes political, civil, economic, social, and cultural rights. In order to take part in inaugurating such a powerful piece of work that has impacted the lives of millions of people beneficially, it takes confidence, courage, and someone who has strong character. Eleanor Roosevelt represented all of those qualities through her work, and her personality traits were built through her experiences as a child as she grew into adulthood. Eleanor Roosevelt was born in the year of 1884. On October 11th in New York City to Elliot and Anna Roosevelt. Eleanor was the oldest sibling to her two younger brothers, which required a lot of responsibility. Together, the three children suffered from many tragic experiences and losses. Eleanor's family was financially comfortable but troubled. Her parents failed to support her and her brothers throughout their childhood. Eleanor's father was often absent, and her mother was always preoccupied in the family's image in upper-class society and embarrassed by Eleanor's unattractive appearance. When Eleanor was only a child, her father, who was an extreme alcoholic who suffered from frequent mental depression, was sent to an institution for alcoholics. When Eleanor was only 8, her mother died, so her and her brothers were sent to live with their maternal grandmother and soon learned that their father had also passed away. To begin her education, Eleanor was taught by a private tutor for 15 years before being sent to Allenswood, a strict private school for girls which she attended for 3 years.
The headmistress, Madame Silvestri, who stressed the importance of direct inquiry and free thinking, took a special interest in Eleanor and greatly influenced her education and encouraged her to think critically about issues and believe in her own intellectual talent. When Eleanor returned from school in the year of 1902, she had gained a sense of confidence in herself and her abilities and continued to think critically about issues such as discrimination. She had suffered personally from discrimination as a woman and witnessed other acts of it. She also took action to become involved in social service work to help others. Her social service work and disbelief about discrimination as a young adult was only the beginning of her many actions. She made her first appearance in society in 1902, and although she felt awkward and uncomfortable there while speaking, she did not give up. She continued on to become one of the greatest speakers in United States history. As Eleanor grew further into adulthood, she continued to help change society for the better in many more powerful and influential ways. She grew into a more confident speaker when she shared about her work or ideas, and through those actions she became known as a positive person who was working to make numerous beneficial changes for the good of others. Another figure who was intrigued by Eleanor's work was her fifth cousin, Franklin D. Roosevelt. He was tall and handsome, and together him and Eleanor fell in love. They were married on March 17th in 1905 in New York City and gave birth to 6 children during 1906 to 1916, though only 5 survived.
Even with a family to watch over and support, Eleanor continued her works of service while Franklin pursued his political ambitions to become a leading figure in the Democratic Party. To help servicemen of World War I in 1918, Eleanor worked with the Navy Department and Red Cross.
In order to help, Eleanor served soldiers and visited the wounded. Though remaining out of the public eye during her work, Eleanor did not support her husband during his campaign and encouraged him to continue his work even though he suffered from polio. While supporting Franklin, she also became a more public figure herself by working for the League of Women Voters, the National Consumers League, the Women's Trade Union League, and the New York State Democratic Committee. Franklin was successful with the help of his wife and her reputation to become the governor of New York. Franklin Roosevelt was elected to presidency in 1932 when the nation was at the depth of the Great Depression. Eleanor later wrote, "The end of any personal life of my own." She quickly became the best-known First Lady in American history. She evoked both intense admiration and strong hatred from her fellow Americans. Although Eleanor did not have much of a personal life, she made many accomplishments as the First Lady of the United States. She was the first lady to help hold a press conference in 1933 and helped Franklin create equal opportunities while speaking out freely on her own. One of the most well-known works of Eleanor during her service as First Lady of the United States was her published My Day column from 1935 to 1962. The column allowed Eleanor to express her views on political and social issues, current and historical events, and private and public life. Eleanor Roosevelt tried to keep the morale high and pursue rights for women and minorities. Beginning in September of 1941, she also served as Assistant National Director for the Office of Defense. It was the first government position ever held by a First Lady in U.S. history. She worked with the director of the OCD to support volunteer programs for the war effort and sought to include nursery schools, recreation centers, and homes for the aged. In February 1942, Eleanor stepped down from her duties as Assistant Director of Civilian Defense. On the 12th of April, in 1945, Franklin Roosevelt passed away due to a massive stroke, ending his term as the 32nd leader of the United States of America. Thousands of Americans came to bid Roosevelt farewell. After his death, Eleanor returned to her private life in Hyde Park for some time.
The next president to take over the office was Mr. Harry Truman. Truman had rather large shoes to fill. Franklin D. Roosevelt had presided over the Great Depression and most of World War II. To keep Eleanor as part of the work, President Truman assigned her as a representative of the United Nations and as the First Lady of the World. With this title, Eleanor took a major role in securing the Universal Declaration of Human Rights on December 10, 1948, in the midst of the Cold War. Although many people contributed to this remarkable achievement, especially those of the UN Commission of Human Rights, who drafted the declaration, agreed that they would not have succeeded without the leadership of Eleanor Roosevelt. She possessed not only a passionate commitment to the human rights, but a hard-earned knowledge of the political and cultural obstacles securing them in a divided world. The establishment of this declaration was Eleanor Roosevelt's most impactful accomplishments because it establishes the recognition of the inalienable dignity of all human beings, making everyone free of discrimination, inequality, or distinction of any kind because human dignity is universal, equal, and inalienable. After securing the Declaration of Human Rights, Eleanor continued to make appearances on social media to share about her experiences, answers questions, or share her opinions. She made numerous appearances on radio shows such as NBC and ABC, and even had her own television show. She worked with and met many other honorable people of her time, such as Albert Einstein and the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. After President Eisenhower was elected as the 34th President of the United States in 1953, Eleanor Roosevelt resigned as the delegate of the United Nations so that the new president could fill the position with an appointee of his choosing.
Eleanor then began to work with John F. Kennedy, and since she was a strong supporter of his ideas and work ethic, she helped him during his campaign when it became time to elect a new president. With the help of Eleanor Roosevelt, Mr. Kennedy was elected the 35th President of the United States in 1961, who served our country while taking into consideration multiple of Eleanor's words of advice and suggestions for experience. Fortunately, Eleanor Roosevelt worked with President Kennedy will be her last. On November 7th in 1962, Eleanor passed away from a case of tuberculosis. Even without her presence, she continued to be honored in numerous ways by many people around the world. In some ways, she was honored through statues made of her individually or with statues made of her and other important people that helped Eleanor to make a change, such as her husband and previous presidents of the United States, Franklin D. Roosevelt. Memorials were also built in her honor of her to recognize the goods that she did for all citizens throughout establishing world peace. For those who are not familiar with the work of Eleanor, various pieces of writing by many different authors were published to spread the story of her life, including information about all of her accomplishments. Her words of wisdom and inspiration are shared around the world through speech and writing to help portray a message that she fought for and to encourage all people to follow her path of leadership by always remembering the importance of universal human rights, something that everyone should consider. As Eleanor Roosevelt once said, the purpose of life is to live it, to taste experience to the utmost, to reach out eagerly without fear of newer and richer experience, which summarized how she went about to make such an everlasting beneficial change for all.